So part of the plan includes, one of the sectors is transportation, land use, community design, which is critical to facilitating physical activity, especially in outdoor places. So I am extremely excited to introduce this panel. So happy to be here introducing the panel. First we'll have Danny Twilley speak, and I'm going to run through the whole title, Danny. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Assistant Vice President for Economic Community and Asset Development for the Brad and Elise Smith Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative. How about we say AVP OEDC?
There it is.
Good. And then we'll get to the panel after Danny. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, thanks for allowing me to be here. This is the second time I've been able to speak about health and kind of outdoor recreation and access in the last month. So thanks to our friends at the Appalachian Health Leadership Forum. And so it's really got me back into thinking about this space. And so I was asked to do a presentation. I took that very literally and put one together. So you'll bear with me a little bit on this. But really what I wanted to do is kind of is it going to work, Jade? Oh, yeah. I want to give you a little bit of a background about the Smith OEDC, kind of some of our work, but then I'll dive into some of the stats that we've been kind of paying attention to as it relates to outdoor recreation with traditional physical activity. So we have the outdoor economy and the youth initiatives. Those are two different units within the Brad and Elise Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative. But one of the things, and it was really interesting, I wish I could have taken snippets of, Speaker Hanshaw, John Deskins, and many others, because they were talking about quality of life, human capital, talent, all of those things. And that's really our North Star for the work that we're trying to do in the outdoor economy team, is trying to address our population loss. We've lost over 12% of our population over the last 73 years, which equates to about 200,000 people. We've seen, we have raced to the bottom in terms of the oldest population. We are one of 3 states who've had population decline. We have the second lowest labor force participation. We also know that 61% of all of our graduating students leave the state from WVU and Marshall upon graduation. We also have found out recently through the leadership of General Hoyer about 29,000 job openings in this. So when we think about quality of life, quality of place, that's kind of the work that we're trying to do. We also know that there's a lot of work around this. So the work of creating accessible health and access to outdoor recreation is really important, because what we know is that quality of life indicators, this was recent work out of the Midwest, has indicated that quality of life indicators outperform business climate indicators in attracting people to live in a place. And so as we keep moving on this, yes, we can use health, we can use physical activity, but what we're really leaning into is that idea of quality of place. And we have that in spades here in West Virginia that we need to focus on. So from the outdoor economy standpoint, this surprises many people over the last 10 years as terms of a percentage of a contribution to our gross domestic product. We are 49th in the country. And so we were outperformed by Kansas, which is surprising. The only state that was worse off than we were was Louisiana, because they retracted by about 10%. And so what we know is that places like Colorado, Utah, historic extractive industries have kind of flipped the narrative in terms of economic and social prosperity and population as well. So, here's our approach. So we get asked this question a lot, so that's why I put it up there, is what is the outdoor economy? It's the combination when you take the outdoor rec industry, which is kind of thinking of that guide service, the hospitality side of it, all of those components, the goods, the great outdoor gear that we get to use and access, all the way to our vibrant communities. This is our main streets. Really think about those main streets, and that livability and access to our public lands. And when we bring those together, that creates the outdoor economy. And so when we first got here to West Virginia and we were really trying to study what do we need, what we really felt is that we need to have high quality recreation and accessible infrastructure. That's the key word. It has to be accessible, it has to be high quality, and it has to kind of lower the barrier of entry. We've been really good at creating really hard stuff to access because it was developed by users, right? Users to build what they want because they're doing it on their time. So we've got to kind of flip that. When we do that, then we work with great partners like Active Southern West Virginia and many of you in the room where they get people out on that. They program it. It's the people part of the equation. And then once we do that, then we can promote it and say, come be part of this. And so there's a national group that's really looking at the outcomes of the outdoor economy. There is a conservation part of this. There is an economic development part. There's a public health and wellness, and there's education and workforce training. And if we can do this, all of that will be present in West Virginia. So how does it relate to physical activity and health and wellness? So I looked at the Aspen Institute. This isn't perfect data, but it's relatively interesting to pay attention to, is that what we basically have seen, 6 to 12-year-olds, most youth sports rates are declining. This is not necessarily surprising to those who are parents, though we have seen some increases in some sports. But again, the most popular sports, basketball, baseball, soccer, have declined again in 2021. When you take a look at 13 to 17-year-olds, we've seen increases to a certain degree in some sports, but what we've seen is an overall decline. And income is the key indicator at participation in this, because what starts happening at this age grade? It's not a trick question, right? Travel. Right, specialized coaching, and so all of a sudden we see a huge cliff in participation, and then that also then transfers into a continued decline as people end up in the workforce or in college. So has anybody ever seen the Outdoor Recreation Participation Trends Report? So a couple of us have, many of us haven't. That's why I wanted to put it out here. They put this out every year. Start paying attention to some of this. And what we're basically seeing is that hiking, running, biking, fly fishing, and camping are kind of the most popular sports that are out there. For youth, we're seeing biking and camping all the way down to hiking. So those sports just kind of take different places. But what we're seeing is that there's a relatively high interest and growing interest in these sports. This one right here is a really interesting one, and it's gotten washed out a little bit, so I'll explain it to you. Basically what it's saying is that outdoor recreation participation across all age groups is increasing. Here's the other cool part. When it's not statistically significant income as a variable as it would relate to participation. So income is not a key indicator for participation across the most popular ones. And here's the other cool part, is frequency. We're starting to see frequency, and that's what this one is showing, is that number. So if I participate in outdoor recreation, I'm participating more often. So that's a really cool thing as well that we're seeing. We also know that there's great things that happen, is that it reduces stress, it creates calms, anxiety, and it lowers the risk of depression. I put this up here, and I'll just walk through a couple of these studies that we can dive into a little bit if needed. Biggest one, if there's access to trails within a mile of someone's house, they will exercise 45 minutes more per week on average. So when you talk about this, let's stop building in these, these fully remote areas, build next to people, build in neighborhoods, build in communities, build it next to our schools. That's going to be critical for this. We also know for every dollar that's invested in outdoor recreation, particularly trails, it has basically about a $3 return in terms of health benefits. The other is I wanted to highlight this recent study or this recent work out of Arkansas, because they basically had a blank canvas. And the Walton Family Foundation, yes, they have a big blank check. So they could basically throw money at the problem, but they showed that it can work. They spent 13 years investing in this, and this is what they found. Over here is a map. Basically, they built trails next to neighborhoods and next to downtown. what they ultimately found, and this is in Northwest Arkansas, if anybody's ever been there, you got to get lost to find it. It's not easily accessible. But what they found by investing in recreation infrastructure, this is from rail trails to soft surface trails in neighborhoods, is that trail use has increased by 10% in pedestrians, and that they've seen an annual bike use increase by 24%. So people, because it's accessible, it's out their back door, it's connected to schools. And so, yes, they invested in it, but they showed that it can be done. So the last thing that we've done, and I'll hit my time perfectly, so thank you, is that what we basically have done, we've taken 18 communities. This is a growing list. We just got some funding to do more of this. And we took a look at whitewater, that's moving rivers, not just hard like the New River Gorge, climbing, mountain biking, ski areas. We're adding fly fishing and some ATV use and motorized. But what we did is looked at geographic centers from communities, looked at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 90 minutes to try to understand those assets, because we're really trying to understand what makes accessible recreation. The final thing I'll say is that we've partnered with NICA, which is the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, and we've taken all of their teams and we've overlaid that with access to public lands, with access to trails, and we're trying to find what we call trail deserts. And so that's how we're trying to use some of the data in order to create it. So we'll talk about it a little bit more, but that's kind of the intersection of kind of access to outdoor recreation, health, and physical activity. And most importantly is, I think it is a matter of investment priorities that we'll talk about in just a little bit to create accessible recreation. So I think I got it.
Nailed it.
All right.
You guys were nice. You turned and walked.
All right, fantastic. We have a fun panel. These are people getting their fingernails dirty, doing the community planning work, doing lots of exciting stuff. So I'm going to try to keep it crisp and moving, couple 3 minutes each, with a couple of questions. From your right to left, we have, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, but Nathan, Eric, and Sam. So why don't you get us started by introducing yourselves, your organization, and tell us your favorite place for outdoor physical activity.
And that was me, right?
Yeah, you start us off, Nathan. How about that?
So Nathan Hobart with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, which has nothing to do with parks. And I'm going to say this a few times, has nothing to do with national parks. So we are a unique program that provides technical assistance across the nation, and we provide technical assistance within communities. So I'm very community-based, and especially around outdoor recreation, public health, and conservation. So very broad. And my main focus is strong organizations and well-planned spaces. And I've done maybe 15 projects in West Virginia in the past 4 years that I've had my job. And that's everything from active Southern West Virginia strategic planning to, let's see here, I had to make a list because I always forget them. The Fayette County Substance Abuse Task Force, Substance Misuse Task Force, Miller Park planning in Huntington, so creating spaces. And across the board, I think the common thread is really thriving communities and how much a well-planned space can lead to great wellness outcomes. Oh,
Favorite place for outdoor activity?
I would say it's like a 2-mile trail really close to my house. It's a terrible trail. It's an old logging road. It's full of poison ivy and ticks, but it's really close to my house, and that's what makes it great.
I love that. I love the sickness you have, Nathan. Very good. All right. Eric, you want to take it away? Introduce yourself and your organization and favorite place for outdoor activity.
Yep, my name's Eric Thompson, or ET. I run a volunteer, at this point, 501c3, promoting community ADA accessibility improvements, adaptive recreation, business profitability, and general disability advocacy. It's access on the go, as Nathan would say, or I guess our motto now is building the outdoor accessible economy. So we go out to the businesses and show them that there's a market out there. 1 in 4 U.S. adults have a disability, 1 in 3 West Virginians do. We have the highest rated disability in the nation, and if you're not making an accessible business, you're not really running a very good business. So we give them the tools to do self-inventories. So basically go out there, find all the barriers that are preventing people from coming into your business. So parking lots, entrances, bathrooms. We show them where there's tax incentives, so you can get up to $20,000 per year to pave that parking lot. Next year, put a ramp on your restaurant. Next year, do bathrooms, and ultimately become more profitable. So in the next 5 years, the IRS will give you $100,000 to make your business better. And then what we can do is now, working with the assistance from RTCA, is getting a way to actually document that accessible infrastructure. So sending people out into the world, getting pictures of parking lots, entrances, bathrooms, activities, recreation, all this different stuff you can do. Get it in a database we can give to the CVBs, West Virginia Tourism, to promote accessible and adaptive-friendly travel, and also just quality of life.
Favorite outdoor activity and location?
That would be the New River Gorge area, but actually on the upper Gauley, using the the Creature Crafts. Did an adaptive outfitting for that allows me to run Class 5 whitewater independently and bring people with disabilities down relatively safer than able-bodied people in this in normal equipment. So yeah, really opening up the world, and hopefully in the future I'd love to get these out into the actual recreational outfitters out there. So when somebody calls up and says, we have a wedding party and one of our people have XYZ issue, they'll say, we got the boat for that. What do you want? Beginner, intermediate, advanced? Just be a passenger, or do you want to learn to oar today?
Some of the videos Eric has on his website are amazing, so check him out. He's a daredevil, so I love those.
That's
So,
one of the fun things. Also biking, yes. Adaptive mountain biking, working with the trails people. Elk River, right now we're working with the Air Raid Bike Park. We're making a fully adaptive-friendly and ADA accessible downhill bike park in Clendening, West Virginia, and working with the entire Elk River to try to work with all the businesses for 72 miles from Gassaway to Clendening, getting them all up to par so we can hopefully just start marketing that as West Virginia's first adaptive-friendly destination. So go do rail trails, go do the river, have fun out there, come do some downhill biking, then we'll send you off to Beckley to go do the trails down there with hopefully some climbing, and then working with the national park, and then send them up to Snowshoe for biking.
awesome. All right, Sam, on to you.
Thank you. Sam England. I'm the executive director for West Virginia Trail, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are focused on the benefits that trails bring. So we do what we can to help organizations and groups and communities build trails, and then try to advocate for what those trails can bring as far as economic development, community health, community pride, increased property values, all the things that Danny talked about on the slide up there, all of those things. I also want to pitch in that I retired in 2019 as the state parks director. I was here as park superintendent for many years, and so I was a park ranger for a long time. And Eloise had reminded me, and it was a great flashback, that a few years ago, it's been a decade or more, we actually began a program here of prescription for parks, where we were attempting to get physicians in the area to use a prescription pad to tell folks, here's your prescription. Go walk 2 miles on this trail at Stonewall Resort State Park as a part of your, what you're going to do for your wellness. We didn't get a lot of legs in that, but it was a great idea. And Eloise, we need to try to do that. Everybody in the room needs to try to do that program. It was a good fit for us. So our organization is out doing what we can to promote trails, to build a trails network, a community of trails users. And we want to work with individual users. We want to work with organizations, foundations, agencies, stakeholders, decision makers in affecting those trails and making them happen. And as Danny pointed out, we know that having trails close by is incredibly important. And you quoted the statistics that if you're within a mile, you're going to hike more or use the trail more, about 45 minutes a week or something like that. So it's an important piece that we believe highly in and are pushing to make attempts to that. And I think in a few minutes we're going to talk about our organization's details that we're doing, some of the things we're working on.
That's right.
Okay.
How did you know?
Well, I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself.
It's the end of the day. Everybody
well,
knows.
hey,
No.
I do have a gift. I can talk if you want.
I was going to reverse the path and then have Danny jump in on this next question too. And we still have roughly 10 minutes, I think, so we're doing well.
I still have part of my answer, though.
I was going to say, how about telling us an example of your work as an organization that you're particularly proud of that
Or a part of the work
yeah,
that we're particularly proud of
that
right now.
achieves this goal?
Okay.
Getting more people out active outside.
Well, let me tell you what we're working on right now, and this fell in our lap, and I am very new at being this executive director, but we are working with a number of organizations along a central West Virginia corridor that will connect a trail that would go from Clarksburg all the way down to the Elk River Trail, and also come from the Burnsville area and go over to Parkersburg. Now, the reason that's important is it is a corridor that would connect right through Stonewall Resort. Matter of fact, the road that you go out here on would be a part, likely, of this corridor trail that we're talking about. When we connect those communities, it also will connect on the Parkersburg to Pittsburgh piece. And if you can get to Pittsburgh on a bicycle or walking, now you can get to Cleveland, you can get to Washington, D.C. So what we're talking about is the ability to bring activity to communities, but also a significant economic development that will bring lots of tourist dollars to the area. So that's our big piece that we that we're working on right now.
Sounds good. Eric, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll be definitely talking to you about that piece as well. Talk a lot of the push from Pennsylvania with the connecting down from that direction. I've spoken with them. Altoona up there as 8,000 acres they're developing bike stuff from. But yeah, that economic development coming down through there, going to Bentonville, I was there this last fall. Ozark Adaptive just expanded their adaptive mountain bike offerings there from 10 riders the previous year with gracious local assistance to provide the food. They opened it up to the public. Groups like Catalyst Sports came in from Asheville, Nashville. That region drove a $250,000 worth of adaptive bikes out there, and we're able to expand ridership that year up to 42 riders coming from everywhere from Canada to California to West Virginia to go out there. Every year I go out to Pocahontas State Park in Virginia, where Paralyzed Veterans of America, their Paralympic feeder program, their top race guys get stipends to train as our Olympians, but they also do an off-road adaptive event just to bring people in every year. They got 20 bikes there where they'll bring in 20, 30 vets, their friends, support riders for 3-4 day weekends every spring and every fall. And they started off 10 years ago. That park had no bike trail system. And Clark Jones started off building a few of them. RVA Moore is a very good nonprofit organization for the Richmond area building. And he said, we built 2 trails a couple years ago for you guys specifically to be friendly for the off-road hand cycles, not realizing within the next 5 years you were going to be riding 85% of our trail system with us not modifying it yet. So now as we're coming up to 10 years and we're starting to do maintenance, we now know what are the low-hanging fruit, the really small and easy things to fix that will make our entire trail system adaptive friendly so we can start bringing people out. And that's where we reach out to trail building organizations and show them, pinch points, easy things, like you don't have to dumb down your trails to make them more universally adaptive friendly. Not accessible, which is like a wheelchair. I mean, you need to incorporate some of that in your system so everybody can get out there without specialized equipment, but then going beyond that and saying, as soon as we get past our trailhead and parking, how far can we get down that trail before there's 2 trees just too tight at ground level for us to get through? Can we just move one of those, or can we just move one rock to open things up? And really doing the trail attributes where you're giving the objective facts of what a trail is so people can know if it's something that's going to be fun for them. And so we're working with groups like Active Southern West Virginia on doing the trails assessments in the national park right now to hopefully get those trail attributes so we can tell people where they can go exercise safely for their physical activity level, and then while capturing those trail attributes also saying, well, for adaptive equipment, here's what the trail's like. You'll be able to figure out if you want to go there or not, so we can open that up for really getting our part of having good access is really having it be accessible for a more universal population. So making sure you do have actual ADA parking, For a van with trailer, it's not in any code, but anybody who's going to be doing adaptive biking or boating isn't putting their equipment on the roof of their car. So just building those kind of design things in. So we try to gather the tools as much as we can to lower the threshold for doing that, and then really empower the people who want to include everybody to be able to do that in a more holistic manner.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And then Nathan, Danny, other examples of how your work is expanding, whether it be access to physical spaces, getting people out there, or doing the work to create those spaces through planning or whatever. Either of you want to jump in on that?
I'm a wet blanket planner, so that means people come to me with big ideas, and they're like, we want to build 64 miles of a giant trail system. And I ask them, well, what are you trying to do? And sometimes public health is sometimes the highest priority. And I am always shocked, based on community engagement approaches, that you really need a lot less. You need a lot less than you think. And that could be 1 mile in every community across a vast number of communities that's not necessarily even connected. But I am always shocked at the number of small trails that get used. I was just up at Jane Lou. We have a trail counter up there. I haven't gotten the counts yet, but there are 2 people out walking on a Wednesday morning, which is very uncommon in a lot of trail systems overall. So I would say community engagement is a big part, and trying to find an appropriate approach to getting people outdoors and getting them physically active. It could be a mode path. It could be super simple. And I also want to say about creating welcoming environments, and that goes to the universal design aspects of things. So this is signage, this is mapping, and I think a core values for me are really empathy and hope, and sitting in someone's chair, wearing their shoes, like anything that gets you into their mindset of how they approach things and what they see. And the best way to go about doing that is just to get some random person off the street, preferably, and have them hike or bike or whatever you're doing with them, and see how they approach the situation. So are they going left? Are they going into the random space you don't want them to go? Or are they going right where you want them to go? And that's where that's a perfect place for a sign. So I'll stop there, but I have a few other things to say.
All right, we'll probably have time. Danny, you want to jump in?
Yeah,
add something?
I'll just use briefly, one of my favorite projects recently has been with Elkins in the greater Elkins area with a project called East, is that they had been trying to get some trail projects moving for some time, and they asked us to come in, and we were able to kind of, as you know, Nathan was talking about, simplify their approach and divide their approach, because we had at the end of the meeting, the National Forest Service was like, we want to be part of this too if it's driven by the community, and if anybody works with the feds, we love them, but they also have a different pace in which they operate. So we put it under one plan, we separated it, and the cool part is we were able to help fund both planning efforts, and one of them has the one closest to town has received, it was 4 phases, and phase 1 and 2 have already been funded, and that's been about 2 years or less in terms of from ideation to funding to get to move dirt. And so that's just one example. And the Forest Service project is now moving, and they'll kill me if I say it, but when we put out the initial mileage, they were like, yeah, that seems good. We didn't even have to reduce. So we're opening up that avenue. And so really what that looks like for us is we try to provide capacity for a lot of the communities to help ensure they get high quality accessible trails, and trying to move dirt from first meeting or funding to 3 years or less. And that's relatively ambitious, but that's what we've been striving to do.
Awesome. So I'm going off script, guys. Watch out. No, we have time to talk for more time. I want to keep y'all here till like 6, okay? No, I love that we're creating spaces, but also inviting people into them, making sure it's welcoming when they're there. So maybe about 30 to 60 seconds each. How about this? What planning or policy tools are in place that might be underutilized, and or policy changes that need to take place to advance this work that y'all are doing? I'll give you a second to think about it.
I'll start right away, and then we'll head it back down, and we'll end with the feds. The number one thing we can do is funding. Hands down, without funding, large-scale federal funding, right now there's only one guaranteed funding source for trails, and that's through DOH right now. That's through TAP and kind of our RPT program. It's great, but it's not enough. So if you want to change the narrative and create accessible trails that solve all of this, it's got to be funded. And other states are doing it. Pennsylvania just made a huge investment. Virginia, Maine, a lot of other states are doing it. So, when you speak to Speaker Hanshaw, because he did say his door is always open, so just say we need funding for high quality, accessible recreation infrastructure. And that's what we need.
And a couple of acronyms were there, TAP and RTP.
Yeah,
Transportation
alternatives
Go ahead.
and recreation trails program.
I'm gonna go ahead and say too on funding also, because as the state parks director, we were the only state funding source that actually used money to fix trails. Maintenance of trails is a concern. So I want to go even further to say there needs to be a source of funding for trails, not only for ribbon cutters, but to be able to take care of and maintain trails. What Danny is doing is excellent, because we're trying to decide how to design a trail so it is always going to be there and it's sustainable and it takes a lot less work. But no trail is without work. And so that money needs to be out there.
And then Nathan, you're going to jump in, and then Eric to
I was
close.
going to ask if Eric I was going to talk about funding too, but I'm going to talk about funding too. So I think some of the biggest challenge or the policy change that I would like to see is the moral imperative of physical activity in public health, more so than the economic benefit. So working with Active Southern West Virginia, we were trying to make the case from the economic development perspective of getting people outside. And when you really dig into the science, which someone has to correct me on this, I'm sure, as someone has read a lot about this, but putting $2 million to a life and breaking that down to $200,000 a year of that person continue living is just like, I can't wrap my head around that. And when we calculate just 7 chronic diseases and we find that getting 150 people active saves $78,000, it's just, it doesn't factor into a lot of the economic development thinking. And a lot of our work has to be justified within the tourism or remote worker or kind of the quality of life side of things that attracts businesses. And I feel like the moral imperative really needs to be into that in the overall legislative thinking. But I'm also a federal employee, so I didn't say that. But I'm just kidding. I can offer information, but I can't advocate. That's all.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, Eric, last word.
Yeah, so funding is definitely important. Planning and then getting the inclusivity part. From firsthand for me, when I got injured, I used to be an EMT and a ski patroller, an outdoor facilitator, and a raft guide and whatever else. I'd help facilitate this type of stuff. But a month after injury, I was back in Tucker County, and first time I realized that 22 of 26 business doors in Thomas, West Virginia, our tourist town with arts and everything else, had steps. You couldn't get in the front door. And so that was when I was kind of immediately, I was like, oh, this is a problem. And 7 months after my injury, I flew out to Oregon, picked up my van and all my stuff and drove cross country all the way across. And the worst place I'd seen for accessibility from Washington State was Welcome Home. And it wasn't just in Thomas and Davis, it was the entire state of West Virginia and something about the region. But other people have been working on this for now 33 years. And it really hadn't been done very well here since then. And I realized pretty immediately that I was like, this is not just bad for, moral imperative side of stuff, that 80% of customers want to spend money at places that are universally accessible because they think it's the right thing to do, regardless of anybody being touched with them in their life with the disability, which is no one, because 1 in 4 U.S. adults have a disability. 1 in 3 West Virginians do. So everybody has somebody there, but it's really that it's your best customer base as well. So like these people travel are more loyal. So if I find a place that has a parking and an entrance and a bathroom and a restaurant, I'm gonna come back there. They're also better connected. I'm gonna tell all my friends that I went to a venue that had like good stage access. So he's a lead singer in a band and is in a wheelchair. That's where you want to go, so somebody doesn't carry you up 3 icy flights of stairs at a ski area to try to get to a place you can play. This place is actually inviting for you to come to. And they're better connected and bring more people with them. So Canadian Valley State Park, because they have a pool lift, you're not going to just get grandma because she likes to swim. You can get the entire family reunion. So really starting planning it into it, and it's not dumbing down the things that are there. Like you can have super advanced bike trails, but you can make them also be able to use by trikes instead of just bikes, by just paying attention to your side hills, paying attention to maintaining trails at at ground level the same way you do at handlebar height. Current modern bikes, 30-inch wide handlebars, if you're coming in between two trees at 20 miles an hour and it's less than 42 inches, you're going to be getting real scared about clipping a tree. But people will chop that off and leave that stump at ground level. Well, my bike's 36 inches at ground level. So you need to start planning for not just the equipment you're on, but what other people might be using as well. And so hopefully in the future, I'm going to be working towards getting, if I get the funding for it, getting trikes that aren't even necessarily for people with disabilities, although they're very helpful for people with traumatic brain injuries. These are actually pedal-powered recumbent trikes. It's for me to put trail builders on. So when they go out and do trail maintenance day, they think they're building a bridge until they get to the parking lot and realize they can't even get through their bollards. Then they're gonna have to fix that, and then they're gonna get to the next place where they fall over and they're like, well, there's too much side hill there. We should probably put a couple rocks in that pothole. And then they'll finally make it to their trail. But helping them kind of look from accessible as a real high standard for everyday equipment. Every trail system, especially if you get federal funding, has to have at least some portion of it set up for that. So that can be a boardwalk to a pond. But with modern equipment now, hopefully getting equipment libraries out into the state parks is something I'd like to see. You can really change what is accessible. It's really adaptive friendly. By getting somebody some good off-road equipment, they can really get out into some pretty interesting areas now, as long as you take out some low-hanging fruit, like make sure there's not pinch points, or make sure they can get through the bollards at the trailheads. 36 inches is not recommended. That's a bare minimum. 42 will keep out all your four-wheelers over 300 cc's. So just starting to rethink that and getting those tools out there where whenever I go out to businesses, I give them what I call the idiot's guide to the ADA. It's the cartoon. It's called the ADA checklist. You literally follow the cartoons, and it says, do you have parking? If no, go to section 2, entrances. If you do have parking, is your first spot handicap accessible and van accessible? This is what that looks like. 8-foot spot, 8 foot of hash lines. That's the most important part. Not the blue symbol on the ground doesn't even need to be there. But it does need to have one sign 60 inches off, but mostly make sure you can get out your door. Then it'll go to one route to get in there. And so it allows them to really go through and easily document these barriers to access, things preventing people from equal access to goods and services. That's your fix-it list. Then we help them make a transition plan. That's taking it from here's where we are to what can we do with $20,000 this year and next year and next year. And then after we've knocked all that off, what else can we add in the future to really start bringing in inclusivity and getting people out to both exercise, it's economic development, and then it's really ultimately quality of life.
So I'm in the unenviable spot of trying to cut us off because I know you guys will keep talking. Eric is super passionate about all his work, and I appreciate that. So, all right. So we are at the last round table. I appreciate all the work y'all are doing. A round of applause. Feel free to give active applause if you can. Stand up. There we go.